The day he quit his job, the sky was a photoshopped shade of blue. Alex, are you absolutely sure about this? The woman from HR, Gabriella, pushed her glasses up her nose. You know the annual bonuses are getting paid out next month. He tossed his corporate ID badge on her desk. To hell with the bonus. I'm moving to Seville to open a guest house. Heads popped up over cubicle walls like a row of prairie dogs. He knew what they were all thinking. Alex Mendoza, the product manager who spent most of his time forwarding inappropriate memes, had finally lost his mind. Walking out of the skyscraper for the last time, he sent a text to his ex-girlfriend. I'm off to chase the dream. Wanna come be the innkeeper's wife? The red exclamation point of a block number was the immediate reply. He flipped a bird at the New York City skyline and booked a one-way flight to Seville. 3 months later, the La Vida Lenta guest house was open for business. The name was the product of a moment of genius fueled by a local cerveza. It wasn't much, 8 rooms and a rooftop patio covered in succulents. His days fell into a rhythm. He'd wake up whenever he wanted, wear flip-flops to the farmer's market for fresh pastries, and spend his afternoons sunbathing in a lounge chair. At night, he'd drink with the guests and swap stories. This was how life was supposed to be, until that one rainy night. He was sprawled on a wicker chair on the rooftop, trying to count the stars. He could only make out 3, but they were a hell of a lot brighter than anything you could see in the city. The clatter of high heels echoed up the staircase, each step sounding like it was going to punch a hole through his wooden stairs. Innkeeper, another bottle of that Stardust ale. The voice was as cold as a beer fresh from the cooler. He turned his head and saw a woman in a black dress, her long hair plastered to her face, lipstick smudged at the corner of her mouth. Ma'am, he said, sitting up, you've already had 4. Afraid I won't pay? She pulled a wad of cash from her Gucci bag and slapped it on the table. This is probably enough to buy your whole rundown in. He raised an eyebrow. The woman radiated a don't touch me, I'm expensive vibe, but her eyes were red and puffy. She'd clearly been crying. All right then, he said, getting up to grab the beer, but don't expect me to carry you downstairs when you're wasted. She let out a cold laugh. With those skinny arms? As he opened the bottle for her, he noticed the faint tan line on the ring finger of her left hand. Ah, a rich woman nursing a broken heart. He took the hint and shut his mouth, sinking back into his chair and playing dead. The rain started up again, drumming a rhythm on the patio's awning. She chugged half the bottle in one go and then suddenly announced, You men are all worthless pieces of crap. That's a hurtful generalization, he said without turning. The cockroach in my bathroom is male, and he's a perfect gentleman. She paused and actually chuckled. The smile vanished as quickly as it appeared, but he saw the dimple. Alex, he said, holding out a hand. Elena, she replied, ignoring his hand and shoving her empty bottle toward him instead. Pour. As he poured, he took a good look at this Elena. She was maybe 27, 28, with skin as pale and perfect as a cloud, sharply sculpted eyebrows, and a nose so straight you could ski down it. But her eyes were the real killer feature. Even when she was glaring, they looked like they were full of water. Seen enough? She asked, arching an eyebrow. Nope, he admitted honestly. You look like you should be the mascot for this place. What's that supposed to mean? You make people want to check in and never leave. She rolled her eyes, but the corner of her mouth twitched up. We kept talking like that, in fits and starts, as she proceeded to drink every last beer he had in stock. By 2 in the morning, the rain had stopped, the stars were out, and she was completely drunk. Hey, she said, poking my cheek, walk me to my room. Which room are you in? Don't remember, she said as if it were the most logical thing in the world. He sighed and helped her downstairs. She draped herself all over him, her expensive perfume mixing with the smell of stale beer. As we got to the second-floor landing, she suddenly shoved me against the wall. You're not bad looking, she slurred, her eyes narrowed in evaluation. Thanks. It's the mountain water. She didn't reply to that. She just kissed him. Her lips were soft and cool with the bitter taste of hops. He froze for about 3 seconds before his instincts took over. It had, after all, been 3 months since he'd last touched a woman. When he woke up the next morning, the only thing left in his bed was a business card. Elena Flores, CEO, Flores Industries. On the nightstand was a thick stack of cash, more than he made in a month from all the rooms combined. Shit, he muttered, rubbing his temples. I just got paid for sex. He shoved the money in a drawer and threw the business card in the trash. A high-powered corporate queen and a small-town innkeeper. We were like a fine single malt whiskey and a cheap can of beer. Mix them together, and all you get is a nasty hangover. Life went back to normal. He went back to his lazy days of sunbathing, chatting up guests, and eating biscuits. Every now and then the memory of that rainy night would surface, but it was quickly chased away by the arrival of a new pretty tourist. Until a Monday morning 3 months later. He was in the kitchen frying up some local sausage while his receptionist, a college kid named Marco, came running in. "Alex, there's a woman in a Porsche here to see you." With a piece of sausage hanging out of his mouth, he walked out to the courtyard and saw Elena Flores. She was wearing a beige trench coat and heels that were completely impractical for his gravel path, looking as out of place as a peacock in a chicken coop. "Long time no see," he said after swallowing his breakfast. "Here to pay for the room you stayed in that night?" She didn't smile. She pulled a piece of paper from her purse and slapped it on the reception desk. "I'm pregnant. It's yours." He nearly choked on his own spit. "Wait a second," he said, picking up the ultrasound photo from that one night. "Are you questioning my fidelity?" she asked, her eyes narrowing dangerously. No, not at all," he said, holding his hands up in surrender. "Just impressed your efficiency is on par with Amazon Prime." She ignored his terrible joke and walked over to the front desk, taking a seat. "I'm giving you 2 options. 1. I pay you $100,000 a month in child support. The child stays with me. 2. You marry me and join the Flores family." His jaw dropped. The sunlight streamed through the window, catching the side of her face. He noticed for the first time the faint dark circles under her eyes. "Why is there an option 2? He asked cautiously. She turned her head, and for the first time he saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "Because my father says an unwed mother is bad for the company's image. So a fake marriage. You can treat it as real if you want," she said with a cold smile. "It doesn't matter. I don't love you." He scratched his head. "Can I have 3 days to think about it? I need an answer now," she said, glancing at her watch. "I have a conference call about a merger at 10. He took a deep breath. 100 grand a month was tempting, but marrying into a dynasty sounded like the title of a trashy romance novel. Besides, he'd only met this woman twice, even if one of those meetings had been intimate. "I'll take option 2, he said, "but I have conditions." She raised an eyebrow. "First, the guest house stays open and I can come back to run it when I have time. Second, you can't tell me to stop making my off-color jokes. And third," he paused, "you have to tell me why you really came to Seville that night." Her expression softened for a fraction of a second before hardening again. "The first condition is acceptable. The second depends on the situation. As for the third," she stood up, "I'll tell you when I feel like it." And just like that, he, Alex Mendoza, a former programmer and current innkeeper in Seville, was inexplicably engaged to a corporate heiress. As he packed his bags, Marco looked at him with tears in his eyes. "Alex, are you being bought by a rich sugar mama?" He ruffled his hair. "Nope. I'm going to be a stud." The eye roll Elena gave him was so intense he thought she might spray something. As the Porsche pulled away from the historic downtown, he took one last look at the sign for the La Vida Linda guest house. The sun was hitting it just right, making the letters gleam. "Having regrets?" Elena asked. He shook his head, then remembered something. "By the way, does your dad know about me?" "He knows," she said, her eyes fixed on the road. "He said he wants to break your legs." His hand trembled as he buckled his seatbelt. "Does this marriage arrangement come with a life insurance policy?" She finally smiled, and that dimple made a reappearance. "Don't worry," she said. "I'll protect the father of my child." He couldn't tell if she was serious or joking, just like he had no idea where this absurd marriage was going to take him. But when he glanced over and saw her hands gripping the steering wheel, so tight her knuckles were white, he had a sudden feeling that maybe this volatile soul wasn't quite as in control as she wanted everyone to believe. The car merged onto the highway, and he rolled down the window. The wind rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth from the mountains. "Hey," he said, "have you thought of a name for the baby?" "It's only been 10 weeks, she said with a frown. "If it's a girl, how about Summer Flores?" "That's terrible." "Okay, how about Elena Jr.? "Shut up." Chapter 2. The Flores family estate in Madrid was the first time he truly understood the phrase, "Poverty limits the imagination." "Is this your house or a museum?" he asked, dragging his suitcase into the foyer and staring up at a crystal chandelier that spanned 3 stories. He suspected the shiny bits on that thing alone were worth more than the entire historic district of Seville. Elena kicked off her heels. "Shut up and follow the butler." The butler was a man in his 60s who looked at him like he was a cockroach that had wandered into a jewelry store. As he led him down a long hallway, he counted the oil paintings on the wall. 12 of them. He was pretty sure he'd seen prints of at least 3 in an art history textbook. "Your room is at the end of the hall on the 2nd floor, the butler said stiffly. "I'm not staying with Elena." The corner of the butler's mouth twitched. "Miss Flores has her own private suite." "Got it." Even a fake marriage had to follow certain ground rules. The room was luxurious, with a bed so soft it felt like sleeping on a cloud. He tested it out, then noticed a piece of paper on the nightstand. Rules of the Flores residence. Rule number 1. No off-color jokes within residence. Rule number 2. Breakfast is at 7 a.m., lunch at 1 p.m., dinner at 7 p.m. Punctuality is expected. Rule number 3. He skipped to the end. Rule number 28. Violation of any of the above rules will result in a deduction from your monthly allowance. Shit. He tossed the rules aside and dug a half-empty pack of cigarettes from the bottom of his suitcase. He barely lit it when the smoke alarm shrieked. 5 minutes later, Elena kicked his door open. "Are you trying to get yourself killed?" He pointed at the cigarette. "Stress relief." "Quit," she said, snatching it from his fingers and stubbing it out. "It's bad for the baby. The baby isn't even born yet, and you're already this strict?" She narrowed her eyes. "Alex, remember your role here. You are the father of my child, not some punk off the street." He held up his hands. "All right, Miss Flores, but I should warn you. The more you oppress the people, the more they'll want to revolt." She turned and left, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. He lay on the bed, staring at the ornate plasterwork on the ceiling. Everything here was so refined it was suffocating. He missed his guest house. He missed its leaky awning and the stray cat that always pooped on his bed. The next morning, he was woken by a sharp knock on the door. A maid stood in the hallway. "Breakfast is served at 7 o'clock. You have 20 minutes. He checked his phone. 6:40 a.m. He hadn't gotten up this early even when he was grinding away in a corporate world in New York. The long dining table was laden with at least 10 different dishes. Elena was already seated at the head, reading through a file. She was wearing a white pantsuit, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, looking like a general about to go into battle. "Morning," he said, pulling out a chair. She didn't look up. "You're 3 minutes late. My watch says it's exactly 7. Time in the Flores household is set by the atomic clock in the kitchen." He almost spit out his milk. An atomic clock? Why not just sync up with NASA's mission control while they were at it? Breakfast ended in silence. As soon as she was done, Elena left, leaving him alone with a table full of leftovers. The butler came over and asked what he wanted for lunch. He said whatever was fine, and he gave me a look that screamed, "I knew it." He had nothing to do all morning, so he wandered around the gardens. The gardener saw him and got so nervous he nearly decapitated a prize-winning rose bush. He crouched down to help him prune some branches, and the old man started trembling. "Mr. Mendoza, sir, this isn't appropriate. I used to grow succulents all the time back in Seville," he said. "Succulents? They're the fat kids of the plant world." The gardener just stared at him blankly. He sighed. It seemed no one in the Flores family had a sense of humor. Elena didn't come home for lunch. The butler informed him she was at a board meeting. He was happy for the free time and ordered a burrito bowl to his room. The butler caught him red-handed, staring at his takeout container like it was a biohazard. "Outside food is not permitted in the Flores residence." "Why not?" "Food safety cannot be guaranteed." He pointed to the logo on the container. "It's Chipotle. It's practically a health food." His face a mask of disapproval, the butler confiscated his lunch. He waited, starving, until dinner, but Elena still didn't show up. By 10 o'clock, he couldn't take it anymore and snuck into the kitchen to find something to eat. The refrigerator was stocked with gourmet ingredients, none of which could be eaten raw. He was contemplating how to open a jar of caviar when he heard footsteps behind him. "Hungry?" Elena was leaning against the doorframe. She'd taken off her suit jacket, and the top 2 buttons of her silk blouse were undone. He noticed her face was pale with dark smudges under her eyes. "You haven't eaten either?" he asked. She didn't answer. She walked straight to the fridge, pulled out a lemon, and took a bite out of it, rind and all. He stared, wide-eyed. "What kind of fresh hell is that?" "It helps with nausea," she said, chewing mechanically, her throat working to swallow. It suddenly clicked. Morning sickness. She shot him a cold glare. None of your business. He watched her defiant profile, and something inside him softened. He snatched the lemon out of her hand. Go sit down. I'll make you some soup. I don't need it. Just shut up, Wonder Woman. He turned on the gas stove. The specialty of the house from the finest innkeeper in Seville, simple chicken broth with crackers. She looked like she wanted to argue, but another wave of nausea hit her, and she clamped a hand over her mouth and ran for the downstairs bathroom. As he listened to the sounds of her retching, it occurred to him that this untouchable CEO was just a regular person who got sick and felt miserable like everyone else. 20 minutes later, he brought a bowl of soup out to the living room. Elena was curled up on the sofa, looking like a stray cat caught in the rain. He handed her the soup, and she took it, sipping it slowly. How was the board meeting? He asked. Her hand paused. How did you know? The butler told me. She put the bowl down. Someone's trying to use my pregnancy as an excuse to take over my main project. A man, right? She raised an eyebrow. He smiled. Just a guess. A bunch of old dinosaurs saying things like, a pregnant woman should be at home resting. Her eyes widened slightly as if she was surprised he'd figured it out. You're coming to the office with me tomorrow, she said suddenly. Huh. If you're going to be my husband, you need to show up where you're supposed to. He scratched his head. But I don't know the first thing about business. You don't need to, she said with a cold smile. You just need to sit there and remind them that Elena Flores is not someone to be messed with. He looked at the fire reignited in her eyes and suddenly found her incredibly attractive. Deal, he said with a grin, but I'm going to need to buy a suit first. It's already been ordered. It will be delivered tomorrow. Of course it was. A bossy CEO's efficiency was second to none. The next morning, he stood in front of the mirror wearing a suit that probably cost more than his car, and he barely recognized himself. Elena walked over and without a word started to tie his tie. She was so close he could smell the gardenia shampoo in her hair. Don't move, she muttered, her fingers expertly looping the silk. He looked down at her focused expression and had the sudden urge to kiss her. The thought startled him, and he quickly looked away. Done. She stepped back and looked him up and down. You clean up nice. Thanks for the compliment. He tugged at his collar. This thing is choking me. Don't you high society types ever feel uncomfortable? She ignored him and turned toward the garage. He followed behind her, wondering how even the back of her head could be so damn good looking. Flores Industries headquarters, a 50-story glass tower. In the elevator, Elena suddenly grabbed his hand. What's wrong? He asked. She didn't answer, but her palm was sweaty. It dawned on him. Are you nervous? Shut up, she hissed. He squeezed her hand. Don't worry. I've got your back. She glared at him. And what are you going to do? I could tell some off-color jokes to lighten the mood. She rolled her eyes, but didn't let go of his hand. The moment the elevator doors opened, Elena's entire demeanor changed. She walked out with her head held high, her heels clicking on the marble floor like a warrior's drumbeat. He followed a step behind, feeling the curious stares from all directions. The boardroom was already filled with about a dozen people. As they walked in, a bald man sneered. Well, look who finally decided to show up. Enjoy your morning, Elena? Elena walked straight to the head of the table. Let's begin. The next 2 hours were the longest in his life. He listened to them rambling on about market share, IPOs, and leverage buyouts, and he was so bored that he could hardly keep his eyes open. That was until the bald man spoke up again. Given Miss Flores' delicate situation, I propose that Vice President Sanchez take over the leadership of the New Energy Project. He knew the term New Energy from files. He was instantly awake. Elena's face was unreadable. There's no need for that, Director Garcia. My pregnancy hasn't affected my judgment. Hasn't it? The bald man, Garcia, gave him a meaningful look. Then how do you explain canceling last night's strategy session because of nausea? A murmur went through the room. He finally understood. Elena hadn't just skipped dinner last night. She had been so sick at the office that she'd had to cancel a critical meeting. Elena's fingers trembled slightly. He stood up, walked over to the water cooler, poured a glass of lukewarm water, and placed it in front of her. Director Garcia, he said with a pleasant smile, does your wife have any children? Garcia was taken aback. What? If she does, then you'd know how miserable morning sickness can be. And if she doesn't? He spread his hands. Then you have absolutely no standing to comment. The room fell silent. Under the table, Elena kicked his shin, but the corner of her mouth was turned up. "And who are you?" Garcia sputtered, his face turning red. "Alex Mendoza, Elena's husband," he said, putting extra emphasis on the last word. "And by the way, your tie is crooked." The meeting ended on a sour note. Back in her office, Elena shut the door and suddenly burst out laughing. "Not bad," she said. "Incredibly stupid, but not bad." He loosened his tie. "Those old guys are a real piece of work." "They're just the beginning," Elena said, walking to the window. "Once I start showing, more of them will come out of the woodwork." Sunlight streamed through the glass, outlining her slender figure. On an impulse, he walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her. She stiffened. "What are you doing?" "I don't know," he said, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I just wanted to hug you." To his surprise, she didn't push him away. They just stood there for a moment, listening to the sound of each other's breathing. "Alex," she said suddenly, "why did you choose option 2? "What 2? "The 2 choices I gave you that day." He thought about it. Maybe it was because of that kiss on the rooftop. She turned to look at him. "That's it." Also, he grinned. $100,000 a month is nice, but marrying into a dynasty sounded like a much better story. She stomped on his foot hard, but her eyes were smiling. On the way home that evening, the elevator in their building shuddered to a halt. They were plunged into darkness. Elena's breathing became quick and shallow. "Afraid of the dark?" he asked. "Shut up," she hissed. He fumbled for his phone and turned on the flashlight. Her face was pale, and she was clutching her purse strap in a white-knuckled grip. He took her hand. "It'll be okay. Just count to 10 with me." "That's childish." 1, 2, 3. She didn't count with him, but when he got to 10 and the elevator was still dead, she whispered, "Count again." He counted again. This time, when he hit 7, the lights flickered back on. Elena immediately snatched her hand back and smoothed her hair, as if a moment of vulnerability had never happened. But he knew in that small, dark space, for a brief moment, they had been real with each other. Before bed, he brought a glass of warm milk to her room. The butler said it helped with sleep. She was reading a file and immediately closed it when he came in. "For you," he said, putting the milk on her desk. She frowned. "I don't drink milk. It's good for the baby." "Drink it, Miss Flores," he said with a wink. "Otherwise I'll have to feed it to you myself." She glared at him, but picked up the glass. When she finished, she had a little milk mustache. He reached out to wipe it away, but she flinched back. "Good night," he said, retracting his hand and heading for the door. "Alex," she suddenly called his name. He turned back. "Tomorrow." She hesitated. "Come with me to the doctor's appointment." He was surprised for a second, then broke into a wide grin. "Yes, ma'am. Whatever my wife says." A pillow flew at his head as he ducked out the door. Lying in his own luxurious bed, he stared at the ceiling. 3 months ago, he was a carefree innkeeper in Seville. Now he was a dynasty's son-in-law and about to be a father. Life was sometimes more ridiculous than his worst jokes. His phone vibrated. It was a text from Marco back at the guest house. "Alex, the Wi-Fi is down and the guests are freaking out." He texted back, "Get David from next door to help." The password is his daughter's birthday. Only after he sent it did he realize how far away that life already felt. Chapter 3. On the day of the ultrasound, Elena wore a loose-fitting white sundress. He stared at her flat stomach for a long time, finding it impossible to believe a tiny person was living in there. "Keep staring, and I'll start charging you," she said, buckling her seatbelt without looking at him. He started the car. "Is there a discount for a monthly subscription?" She rolled her eyes, but the corner of her mouth twitched upwards. Ever since the night he'd made her soup, her attitude toward him had subtly softened, though on the surface she still had that "don't come near me" force field up. The hospital's VIP wing was as quiet as a library. As the nurse led them into the ultrasound room, Elena suddenly gripped his wrist. "What's wrong?" he asked. She let go. "Nothing." He realized then that her fingertips were ice cold. So the fearless Elena Flores was scared of a doctor's appointment. The doctor was a kind, middle-aged woman. She had Elena lie down and squeezed a clear, cold gel on her stomach. Elena winced, and he instinctively took her hand. "Cold," he whispered. She didn't answer, but she didn't pull her hand away either. The doctor moved the probe, and a blurry gray image appeared on the monitor. He stared, trying to make sense of it, when a rapid thump, thump, thump filled the room. "The baby's heartbeat is very strong," the doctor said with a smile. The sound was like a tiny drum, fast and loud. His nose started to tingle, and without any warning, a tear rolled down his cheek. "Shit," he muttered, wiping his face. "Is this machine leaking electricity or something?" Elena looked at him, surprised, and then she smiled. Not a smirk or a sneer, but a genuine, dimple-flashing smile. A sliver of sunlight broke through the blinds and landed on her eyelashes like a sprinkle of gold dust. The doctor handed them a printed photo from the ultrasound. He carefully tucked it into his wallet. Elena pretended not to notice. "We're having lunch at the main house," she said as they left the hospital. "My father wants to meet you." He nearly tripped over his own feet. "We're doing the meet the parents thing already?" "It's just a formality," she said, her expression unreadable. "You are technically my husband." The Flores family's main estate was even more ridiculous than the guest house they'd put him in. It was a compound with its own man-made lake. As they entered, the butler whispered to him, "Mr. Flores does not appreciate wisecracks." "Perfect," he said, straightening his tie. "I'm a very serious person." 7 or 8 people were already seated in the dining room. At the head of the table sat an old man with a full head of silver hair and a gaze as sharp as an X-ray. He instantly understood where Elena got her intimidating stare. It was genetic. "Dad," Elena said softly. Mr. Flores nodded, his eyes landing on him. "So this is the innkeeper?" "Alex Mendoza," he said, extending his hand. "A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Flores." He ignored his hand and pointed to a chair with his cane. "Sit." The meal felt like a doctoral dissertation defense. The Flores family members took turns interrogating him, asking about everything from his family background to his education and income. They stopped just short of asking for a DNA sample from his great-great-grandparents. He answered honestly. He came from a rural background, worked as a programmer in New York and now in a small one in Seville. "So you're after my daughter's money?" the old man asked suddenly. The table fell silent. Elena gripped her knife. He put down his fork. "Mr. Flores, you're asking the wrong question." "Oh, you should be asking, is my daughter after his good looks?" He pointed to himself. "I mean, I'm not hard on the eyes." Under the table, Elena stomped on his foot hard. Mr. Flores narrowed his eyes, then suddenly burst out laughing. "Interesting," he said, turning to Elena. "Better than the last few boyfriends you brought home." He raised an eyebrow at Elena, who looked furious. It seemed her romantic history was a mystery yet to be solved. After lunch, Mr. Flores summoned him to his study, alone. He sat behind a massive mahogany desk looking like a judge on a bench. "Alex, I've had you checked out," he said, getting straight to the point. "Your guest house in Seville does reasonably well, but compared to the Flores family, it's a corner store." He shrugged. "A corner store can have its own kind of happiness. My daughter needs someone who can help her run a corporation, not a laid-back innkeeper who tells crude jokes." He smiled. "Mr. Flores, do you know what innkeepers are best at?" He raised an eyebrow. "Resolving conflicts," he said, gesturing toward the lake outside. "We're like water. It looks soft, but it can cut through stone. What Elena needs right now isn't another businessman. She needs a glass of lemonade to help with her morning sickness." The old man stared at him for a long time. "There's an investment summit next week," he said finally. "You'll accompany her." He hadn't expected to pass the test that easily. As he was leaving the study, Mr. Flores added one last thing. "Remember, the child may have the Flores name, but you will always be a Mendoza." Back in the living room, Elena was talking to a glamorous woman. When the woman saw him, she covered her mouth theatrically. "So this is your husband? He's much more handsome in person." "Aunt Gabriella," Elena said coolly, by way of introduction. "My father's third wife." Gabriella grabbed his hand warmly. "Alex, dear," Elena can be a bit stubborn. "You have to be patient with her. She was such a sweet child, you know. It's her father who spoiled her." Elena suddenly gagged, covered her mouth, and ran for the restroom. He quickly followed, hearing Gabriella call after them. "Oh, the morning sickness is perfectly normal. When I was pregnant with Elena's little brother, I was sick for 5 months straight." In the bathroom, Elena was leaning over the sink, gasping for air. He handed her a paper towel. She grabbed his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. "Don't say another word to her. She seems to like you. Last year, she tried to set me up with her nephew." Elena sneered. "Now she's sucking up to you. All she wants is another vote on the board of directors." He was beginning to understand that the politics of the Flores family were murkier than the Guadalquivir River after a storm. On the way back, Elena stared out the window the entire time. When they stopped at a red light, He reached over and gently brushed a stray hair from her face. She turned, her eyes wide like a startled deer. "What? You had something in your hair?" He lied. "Oh," she said, turning back to the window, but the tips of her ears had turned a telltale shade of red. On Monday morning, wearing another one of the three-piece suits Elena had prepared for him, he went with her to the investment summit. The venue was filled with the rich and famous, and champagne towers were stacked higher than the Sierra Morena mountains. "Stay with me and don't say anything stupid," Elena whispered. He made a zipping motion across his lips. She glared at him, then turned and networked. He stood off to the side, feeling like a decorative accessory. "You must be Miss Flores' partner." A slick-looking man with too much gel in his hair sidled up to him. "A pleasure." He shook his hand. "And you are?" "Vice President Sanchez from Sanchez Properties," he said with a meaningful smile. "I hear you used to run a guest house. That's quite the career change." He was about to come up with a sarcastic reply when he saw Elena surrounded by a group of clients. Mr. Sanchez's female assistant coincidentally handed her a cup of coffee. As soon as Elena took it, her expression changed. She fought back a wave of nausea, a thin sheen of sweat breaking out on her forehead. He strode over, took the coffee from her hand, and drained it in one gulp. "Thanks, but my wife can't have caffeine. She's pregnant." The assistant stammered an apology. "I'm so sorry, I didn't know. Pregnancy isn't a contagious disease. No need to broadcast it," he said, putting his arm around Elena's waist. "If you'll excuse us, my wife needs some fresh air." Once they were out of the conference hall, Elena threw up violently in the restroom. He crouched beside her, holding her long hair back, feeling her back tremble. "They did it on purpose," she said, catching her breath. "They know the smell of coffee makes me sick." "I figured," he said, handing her a bottle of water. "Is that Mr. Sanchez, one of Director Garcia's cronies?" She looked at him, surprised. "How did you know?" "Innkeepers are experts at reading people," he said, wiping a drop of water from her chin. "So are we going back in and fight, Miss Flores?" She shook her head, a rare look of exhaustion on her face. "Take me home." That night he was woken by a soft groan. He followed the sound to Elena's room and found her curled up in bed, clutching her calf. "Leg cramp?" he asked. She nodded, biting her lip. He sat on the edge of the bed, lifted her leg onto his lap, and found a knotted muscle, pressing down hard. Elena gasped in pain and grabbed a pillow, her nails nearly tearing through the fabric. "Just breathe," he said, rubbing the muscle in firm circles. "We get guests with altitude sickness and cramps all the time at the guest house. This trick works every time." Gradually, her tense muscles began to relax. He continued to massage her leg, from her calf down to her ankle. Elena had beautiful feet, slender and pale, with nails painted a soft pink. On a whim, he leaned down and kissed the top of her foot. She recoiled as if she'd been electrocuted. "You?" "Sorry, professional habit," he lied smoothly. "At the guest house, we always end a massage service with a kiss to signify completion." "That's the biggest load of crap I've ever heard," she said, pulling the covers up to her chin. He didn't argue. He just sat there on the edge of her bed, watching her. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting shifting shadows on her face. Without the sharp edges of the day, she looked like a normal girl. "Alex," she said suddenly. "Yeah? Why? Why are you being so nice to me?" He thought for a moment. "Maybe because you're carrying my kid?" She threw a pillow at him. He caught it with a laugh, then noticed the glint of tears in her eyes. "Elena." She turned her back to him. "Get out. I need to sleep." He closed the door softly behind him and stood in the hallway for a moment. His heart was pounding like he'd just run a marathon. The next morning at breakfast, Elena was back to her icy self. As if last night's vulnerability had never happened. The butler handed him a folder. "Miss Flores asked me to give this to you." Inside was a thick file on Flores Industries, filled with dense data and project summaries. He looked up at Elena, who was sipping her green smoothie elegantly. "If you're going to attend company events, you should at least try to look the part." "Yes, ma'am. Whatever my wife says." She didn't correct his use of wife, but the tips of her ears turned red again. That afternoon, Elena went to the office for a meeting, and he sat in the garden trying to make sense of the files. His phone rang. It was Marco from the guest house. "Alex, a pipe burst. The lobby is flooding." He rubbed his temples. "Call David. David's out of town. The guests are demanding refunds." He glanced at his watch and grabbed his car keys. Elena should still be in her meeting. He shot her a quick text and sped toward Seville. The guest house was a disaster. The first-floor lobby looked like a water park attraction, and several angry guests were standing with their luggage demanding compensation. He rolled up his pants, grabbed a wrench, and crawled under the main water tank. 2 hours later, soaked to the bone and looking like a drowned rat, he finally fixed the pipe. Alex, Marco timidly handed him his phone. Miss Flores called 8 times. He took the phone, and before he could even say hello, he heard Elena's cold voice. You had better have a very good explanation. The guest house's pipes. I know, she cut him off. The butler told me. He froze. You had someone follow me? It's called protection, she said, then paused. Are you coming back for dinner? Her tone sounded strangely like a wife waiting for her husband to come home. A warmth spread through his chest. I am. I'll bring you some local cheese grits. No, too greasy, she said, and hung up. He smiled and shook his head, handing the phone back to Marco. As he turned, he caught his reflection in a window and saw a goofy grin plastered on his face. Crap. He thought he was actually falling for the volatile CEO. On the drive back, a text from Elena came through. Someone on the board leaked core data from the new energy project. Emergency meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Don't be late. Chapter 4. The air in the boardroom was as still and cold as a mountain lake in winter. He sat in a corner, watching the numbers and charts flash across the projection screen. While he didn't understand the specifics, the looks on everyone's faces told him one thing. This was bad. The core data for the new energy project has been compromised. A competitor filed a patent application with our exact specs a week ahead of us. The head of our RD's voice was shaking. Our 3 years of research and investment might be worthless. Elena sat at the head of the table, her fingers tapping a light, steady rhythm on the polished wood. She was wearing a loose black blazer, artfully concealing her small but growing baby bump. Only he knew that the rhythm of her tapping was just a fraction of a second too fast, a telltale sign of her extreme stress. What did the internal investigation find? Her voice was terrifyingly calm. The preliminary conclusion is corporate espionage, the head of security said, wiping sweat from his brow. The access logs show the data was downloaded last Wednesday in the middle of the night using your account, Miss Flores. The room erupted. Director Garcia, the bald man, shot to his feet. Elena, what do you have to say for yourself? It's one thing for your pregnancy to affect your work, but now you can't even manage your own account security? He clenched his fists, but a sharp look from Elena stopped him. She rose slowly, her hands planted firmly on the table. First, my account has 2-factor authentication. It cannot be easily compromised. Second, I was at home, resting, last Wednesday. The estate's security footage can prove that. Then how do you explain the login? Garcia sneered. Was it a ghost? It was a mole, Elena said coldly. The room fell silent again. He noticed the head of RD swallow hard, while beads of sweat formed on Director Garcia's shiny head. The board ultimately voted to form an investigative committee and, in the meantime, suspend Elena's management of the new energy project. After the meeting, Elena went straight to the restroom. He waited outside for 10 minutes before knocking anxiously. Elena, are you okay? No response. He pushed the door open to find her leaning against the sink, her face as white as a sheet, her knuckles bloodless as she gripped the marble countertop. Elena. She looked up, and he was shocked to see a single tear slide down her cheek. It was the first time he had ever seen her cry. They won, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Just because I'm pregnant. Just because I'm a woman. He pulled her into a hug, feeling her whole body tremble. Her perfume mixed with a faint scent of stress, her hair brushing against his face. She reminded him of a stray cat he once found in Seville, fiercely independent but terrified and fragile when hurt. Listen to me, he said, tilting her face up to his. We're going to fix this. She gave a bitter laugh. You can't even read a balance sheet. But I can read people, he said, wiping away her tear. Back to your office. Tell me everything about this project. Elena's office had a floor-to-ceiling window with a panoramic view of the city. She sank wearily onto the couch. He knelt in front of her and took off her heels. Her ankles were slightly swollen. He began to gently massage them as she explained the multi-billion-dollar new energy project. So, it's essentially a new type of battery technology, she said, rubbing her temples. It could increase an electric vehicle's range by 40%. But now our competitor has all the data. He thought for a moment, remembering an incident at his guest house last year. The bar next door stole the recipe for my signature cocktail. Do you know how I handled it? Elena raised an eyebrow. I immediately launched the knockoff special, he said with a grin. Half the price with a new slogan. So good you'll think it's the original. All the customers came rushing back to me, curious to see if the copy was really better. Elena's expression became thoughtful. You're suggesting we voluntarily release some of the technology? No, we release a Trojan horse, he said, jumping to his feet. Since they stole the data, let's play their game. We'll leak a revised version, one with a few critical errors mixed in. Let them waste their time and money heading in the wrong direction. A spark ignited in Elena's eyes. She quickly opened her laptop and pulled up a data set. Here, if we alter the ratio of the negative electrode material by just 0.3. Exactly. Let them build a bunch of batteries that spontaneously combust. She suddenly laughed, that rare dimple making an appearance. Alex, you're a genius. No, I'm just a sneaky innkeeper. For the next 48 hours, Elena and he practically lived at the office. She worked with the tech team to alter the data while he was in charge of ordering food and telling terrible jokes to keep morale up. At 3 a.m., when the final flawed parameter was set, the entire team cheered. Elena collapsed in her chair. He walked over and started massaging her shoulders. Her muscles were as hard as rocks, but they gradually softened under his hands. You're good at this, she murmured, her eyes closed. My 5-star reviews in Seville are 50% for the accommodations and 50% for my massage skills. She chuckled softly, then suddenly grabbed his hand. Alex, thank you. Those 2 words, as light as a feather, sent a jolt through him. He leaned down and whispered in her ear. Miss Flores, let's go home. She nodded, already too tired to open her eyes. He scooped her up into his arms and carried her out of the office, past the knowing smirks of her tech team. Elena felt as light as a leaf in his arms. In the elevator, her head rested on his shoulder, her breathing even. He found himself wishing the ride would never end. The next afternoon, while Elena was napping in her office, he snuck out to buy her favorite spicy ramen. When he returned, he heard voices from inside. Miss Vance, I really don't think now is the right time to discuss a partnership. Elena's voice was ice cold. On the contrary, Miss Flores, your company's crisis is the perfect opportunity for us to step in, a familiar female voice said, making his entire body go rigid. I'm an expert in the new energy sector. I can help you mitigate your losses. He pushed the door open and saw Clara, his ex-girlfriend, dressed in a sharp business suit, sitting elegantly across from Elena. Her eyes lit up when she saw him. Alex? Elena's gaze darted between him and Clara, her face growing colder by the second. You two know each other? She asked. Clara answered first. We were in college together. We were. She's my ex, he admitted bluntly. We broke up 3 years ago. Elena's fingers started tapping on her desk at an alarming speed. Clara, meanwhile, smiled and handed him a business card. I'm a consultant for green energy tech now. It's a happy coincidence. I'm in the perfect position to help Miss Flores with her current predicament. He glanced at the card. Green energy tech, one of Flores Industries' main competitors. What a coincidence, he sneered. Your company just stole our data, and now you're here to help? Clara's face fell. Alex, what are you talking about? Exactly what I said. He placed a ramen in front of Elena. Now, are you going to walk out on your own, or do you want me to have security escort you? Clara stood up indignantly. As she left, she shot a meaningful look at Elena. You should get more rest, Miss Flores. Pregnancy can be so draining. The boardroom is no place for a delicate mother-tope. Elena shot up from her chair, but he pushed her gently back down. He yelled after Clara's retreating back. By the way, your nose job is crooked. After the door slammed shut, Elena shook his hand off her shoulder. Your ex-girlfriend? It was a college thing, he said, holding his hands up in surrender. I swear I had no idea she'd show up. Did she know you were working here? She knew I was running a guest house in Seville. A thought struck him. Wait. She just said, your company's crisis. The data leak was only announced internally this morning. How did she know about it so quickly? Elena and he looked at each other, the same thought occurring to them at the same time. Director Garcia, she said through gritted teeth. Before he could respond, Elena's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her face went pale. It's my father. The voice on the other end was so loud he could hear it from across the room. Get to the house now, and bring that innkeeper with you. The atmosphere at the main house was even more tense than the last time. Mr. Flores sat in his imposing armchair, a stack of newspapers spread out before him, all with headlines about the Flores Industries data leak. Do you have any idea how much the stock has dropped? He bellowed. Elena stood tall. Dad, we have a plan in place. What plan? One based on the half-baked ideas of this innkeeper? The old man sneered. I just got word that Green Energy Tech is about to hold a press conference. He couldn't help but interject. Mr. Flores, that's exactly what we want. Shut up, he roared. Elena, I'm giving you two choices. 1. Terminate the pregnancy immediately and focus all your energy on saving the company. 2. If you insist on having this child, then you will resign as CEO and stay home. The color drained from Elena's face. He stepped forward. Mr. Flores, that's not fair. Get out, he yelled, pointing at him. This is a Flores family matter. Elena suddenly grabbed his hand. Alex is my husband and the father of my child. He has every right to be here. The old man narrowed his eyes. So what is your choice? I choose neither, Elena said, her voice trembling but firm. I will save my child, and I will save my company. And who do you think you are? Superwoman? Mr. Flores slammed his hand on the table. Your mother was just as stubborn. She almost died in childbirth because of it. So you want me to repeat her tragedy? Elena's eyes filled with tears. Dad, I am not my mother, and Alex is not you. I am having this baby. Her father was shaking with rage. Fine, he spat. Let's see how long you last without the family's support. On the drive back, Elena stared silently out the window. He reached over and took her cold hand. We're going to win this. She didn't speak, but she squeezed his hand tightly. That night, Elena came down with a low-grade fever. He sat by her bed, dabbing her forehead with a cool, damp cloth. In the middle of the night, she woke up dazed and saw him still sitting there. What time is it? She asked, her voice hoarse. 3 in the morning, he said, feeling her forehead. Still feeling sick? She shook her head, then said, Sing me a song. Huh, that Appalachian folk song you were humming the other day? She shifted over in the bed, making a little space for him. He lay down beside her and began to softly sing, The Wayfaring Stranger. Elena rested her head on his chest, her breathing evening out. Moonlight streamed through the curtains, casting tiny shadows from her eyelashes onto her cheeks. He carefully put his arm around her, afraid to break the fragile peace of the moment. 3 days after the boardroom drama, Clara Vance walked into Flores Industries as a special consultant for Green Energy Tech. She breezed in just as he was massaging Elena's temples. The long night spent setting the data trap had triggered a migraine that felt like a Blue Ridge thunderstorm inside her head. Long time no see, Alex, Clara said, her red lips curved like a blade. The rhinestones on her nails glittered under the projector's light. She used his old nickname deliberately, her eyes flicking to Elena's back, which had gone rigid. Elena's pen dug a long black scar across a memo. He gave her shoulder a reassuring squeeze and turned a professional smile on Clara. Miss Vance, I think you have the wrong conference room. The new energy team is on the 18th floor. I'm just here to drop this off, Clara said, placing a USB drive on the table. The metallic clink sounded like a gun being cocked. Green Energy is willing to acquire your leaked technology at 120% of the market rate. After all, it's second-hand goods at this point. Elena let out a soft laugh. The sound sent a chill down his spine, like the eerie silence of the wind chimes on his Seville porch right before a lightning strike. Tell Director Garcia, Elena said, nudging the USB drive with her pen, that the mole he hired confessed last night. She clicked a button and the projector flared to life, showing security footage of the bald man carrying a cardboard box out of the building. And by the way, the thermal runaway parameters you received will cause your batteries to spontaneously combust at 144 degrees Fahrenheit. The color drained from Clara's face. Elena stood up, her loose blazer no longer able to hide the gentle curve of her stomach. The sight made Clara's pupils constrict. She was finally noticing that Elena was pregnant. Oh, and one more thing, Elena said, sliding an invitation across the table. Our baby shower is next month. You simply must come, Miss Vance. She stressed the word, our, her fingers unconsciously tracing the ring finger of her left hand where the faint tan line used to be. The second Clara slammed the door behind her, Elena doubled over with a dry heave. He rushed to hand her some water, but she grabbed his wrist instead. Where's the ring? What ring? I noticed my wedding ring was gone from my jewelry box this morning, she said, her eyes shot with a feverish red. Did you give it to her? It hit him then. He'd knocked it off the desk yesterday when he was looking for that file. It must have rolled into the drawer. He fished the platinum band out of the crevice. She snatched it from his hand with enough force to leave crescent-shaped nail marks in his palm. That night, a security alert woke him from a dead sleep. The feed showed someone in the underground garage. It was Clara, splashing red paint on his car. The word liar dripped down the driver's side door like blood. Then a second camera feed lit up. Elena in a silk robe standing in the shadows, gripping a golf club. By the time he sprinted downstairs, the paint can was rolling next to the tire. Elena had the head of the golf club tilted under Clara's chin. The sash of her robe had come loose, revealing the faint purple love bite he'd left on her collarbone the night before. The scene was bizarre and erotic, like a poisonous flower blooming in the moonlight. That photo you loved so much, the one of the stars over the river, that Alex sent you in 2018? Elena's voice was as sweet as poison wine. I was the one who took it. He doesn't even know how to frame a shot, does he? He froze. He hadn't even known Elena in 2018, but she was right. That photo, Clara's favorite, was one he'd paid a photographer friend at the guest house to take. After Clara fled, Elena dropped the club and collapsed next to the car, vomiting violently. When he lifted her, he saw her bare feet were stained with paint and dotted with shards of glass from a broken bottle. She was trembling in his arms, but still staring in the direction Clara had run, her expression reminding him of a line from an old folk song. Chasing a moonbeam you can see but never touch. Back in the bedroom, he found a cut on her foot. As he was washing it, was it worth it? He asked, dabbing it with antiseptic. Getting this worked up over an ex? She suddenly grabbed the front of his shirt. Do you know what she sent me today? Her phone at his chest. On the screen was Clara's latest Instagram story, a grid of 9 old photos of them. The last one of her wearing his button-down shirt. Caption, 7 years means less than 7 months. He finally understood. That photo was taken during a rainy season in Seville. The tattoo peeking out from under the shirt was actually a medicated patch for a shingles outbreak, but the explanation didn't matter. The emotion churning in Elena's eyes was more terrifying than a storm over the mountains. I'm going to buy out green energy tech, she said, biting down on his collarbone, the pain mixing with a sharp thrill. And then in front of the entire company, I'm going to make you scream my name, just to prove who you belong to. The raw possessiveness of her kiss made the hair on his arms stand up. The lyrics of a song he used to hear in Seville bars came to mind. Maybe love is waiting down by the river. But nobody ever mentioned that love might be a rose with thorns. The next morning, Elena picked out his suit. Her fingers grazed over the tie rack before selecting one with a dark, subtle pattern, almost identical to one Clara had given him years ago. But this one had the letters SW embroidered on the back. SW? Slave. Warrior, she said, her hands suddenly tightening the knot at his throat. My slave. My warrior. The comment made her stepmother Gabriella spill her coffee at the breakfast table. Elena calmly spread blueberry jam on her toast. Aunt Gabriella, wasn't your nephew looking for a position in the procurement department? I think a spot just opened up. You can start today. Gabriella went pale. Procurement was the department where Director Garcia had been skimming money for years. He looked at Elena's elegant profile as she ate, remembering an article he'd read about possessive personality types. Extreme possessiveness is often paired with meticulous calculation. She had laid the trap long ago and was just waiting for her prey to walk into it. On the way to the office, the car radio played a familiar indie folk song, By the River You Were With Me. As the singer's raw voice filled the car, Elena leaned over to adjust the air conditioning, her fingers accidentally brushing the inside of his thigh. Focus on the road, she said, pulling back. A tiny smudge of blueberry jam was at the corner of her mouth. He leaned over and licked it off, just as the car behind them laid on its horn. He glanced in the rearview mirror and saw his own idiotic, satisfied grin. Crap, he was actually starting to enjoy this. At the negotiation table that afternoon, Clara discovered that for every point she made, Elena had a silent signal for him. A twirl of her pen meant counter that. A touch of her earlobe meant offer less. A bite of her lower lip meant go for the kill. When he dropped the final piece of evidence exactly as cued, Clara finally broke. You're cheating. One of the fringe benefits of a strategic marriage, Elena said, toying with her wedding ring, which was now firmly on her right ring finger. It's like when your side uses seduction to steal data. She suddenly dropped the ring down the collar of his shirt. Except my Alex only responds to me. The cold metal slid against his chest, and he nearly groaned in front of the opposing counsel. The public display was hotter than any bonfire, and it burned Clara so badly that when she stormed out, she snapped the heel off her shoe. At the celebratory dinner that night, Elena had a rare half-glass of champagne. On the way home, she hummed a soft tune, resting her cheek against his arm as he drove. While they were stopped at a red light, she asked, "Are the roses in the guest house's courtyard still blooming?" His heart stuttered. Clara had planted those. I tore them all out after we broke up and planted bluebells instead. Gone for years, he said, squeezing the back of her neck. It's all your favorite bluebells now. She was quiet for the rest of the ride. It wasn't until they were in the garage that she spoke again. I sent someone to Seville. Seeing his frozen expression, she gave a small, humorless laugh. Don't worry, they're just shipping some of your old things from the guest house here. I'm going to get ugly in the last semester. I'll need the smell of the mountains to make you stay. The grammatical slip revealed her insecurity. Stay, not stay with me. It was how she always used aggression to hide her vulnerability. As he carried her out of the car, the moonlight fell across her stomach where their child and all her unspoken fears resided. Elena, he said, pressing his forehead against hers, you could be sick every day until you give birth, and you'd still be the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Her eyes grew misty, but she was still defiant. Liar. You always liked Clara's type. He silenced her with a kiss, tasting blueberries and the salt of her tears. He remembered another line from that article. Beneath the extreme behavior of a possessive person is often a desperate need to be loved. Like the river needs the moon, even if its reflected light is as cold and sharp as a knife. Later that night, he was awakened by choked sobs. Elena was curled in a lounge chair on the balcony, her phone screen glowing. She was looking at an old photo of Clara, slim and carefree. He knelt and wrapped his arms around her. She struggled, biting his shoulder until he could taste blood. I hate you, she sobbed, but her hands were clenched tightly onto his pajama shirt. And I hate myself more for becoming this. Chapter 6. Elena's high blood pressure diagnosis felt like a branding iron in the palm of his hand. The doctor pointed to the monitor. Systolic at 160, urine protein 3+. It's preeclampsia. The medical jargon buzzed in his ears, finally settling into a single terrifying warning. She needs to be admitted immediately. The risk to both mother and baby is severe. From her hospital room window, the city looked like a forest of steel. Sunlight shattered by the glass facades of skyscrapers fell across Elena's pale face. A nurse dripped magnesium sulfate in her left arm, while her right hand furiously typed out an email. The tube swayed with every key stroke. Miss Flores, he said gently, taking her laptop. Your only job right now is to play the part of the beautiful, ailing patient, not the workaholic CEO. She glared up at him, the blood vessels in her eyes like a road map. Give it back. The final bids for the new energy project are due today. And then what? Let your blood pressure spike to 180 and pass out on a conference table? He slid the laptop into his bag. Do you know what the nurse just said? That pregnant lady is as stubborn as a mule. For a second I thought she'd mistaken you for someone else. The corner of Elena's mouth twitched, her telltale sign of a suppressed smile. Her hand went to her belly where their 5-month-old child was now wired up to a host of monitoring machines. Alex, she said suddenly, what I mean is if it comes to a choice. There is no if. He cut her off, raising the head of her bed. Chicken soup or fish soup? I had Marco from the guest house make both and send them over. She stared at him for a few seconds, then grabbed a pillow and threw it at him. Can you be serious for once in your life? The pillow landed softly against his chest. He caught it and noticed a dark, damp spot on the pillowcase. She'd been crying again. The discovery made his throat tighten. Listen, he said, sitting on the edge of the bed and taking her cold hand. I already had the tech team release the doctor data according to our plan. Green Energy Tech is currently busy trying to develop a self-combusting battery. As for the final bid, He pulled a file from his bag. I was up all night reading through their materials. They overlooked one critical detail: rare earth mineral quotas. Elena's eyes lit up. Exactly. The CEO of the largest domestic supplier is a regular at my guest house. He's already promised us priority allocation. He raised his eyebrows smugly. I traded your husband's handsome face for it. Elena finally laughed, her dimple making a brief appearance. When did you learn to negotiate business deals? Haggling is an innkeeper's greatest skill, he said, tucking the blanket around her. Just yesterday, a guest tried to pay his bill with a counterfeit 100. I spotted it immediately. Guess who he was? The assistant VP of finance at Green Energy Tech. Elena's laughter was cut short by a knock on the door. Her stepmother Gabriella stood there holding a fruit basket, a strange man in a doctor's coat behind her. Elena, darling, this is Professor Liu, a specialist from Johns Hopkins, Gabriella announced brightly. Your father had him flown in for consultation. He felt Elena's fingers tighten around his hand. Professor Liu glanced at the monitors, flipped through her chart, and then delivered the sentence that froze the blood in his veins. As per Mr. Flores' instructions, if the situation deteriorates, our recommendation is to prioritize the mother. The room became so quiet he could hear the drip of the four. Elena's nails dug into his palm, a sharp, grounding pain. That won't be necessary, he heard himself say. My wife and my child are both going to be fine. Professor Liu pushed his glasses up his nose. Mr. Mendoza, medicine is not a game. Then use my blood, he said, rolling up his sleeve. Take as much as you need. Doesn't thinning the blood help lower pressure? Gabriella gasped. Elena yanked his arm. Are you crazy? No, he whispered, leaning close to her ear. Remember that guest at the guest house with altitude sickness? Bloodletting is an old-school remedy, but it works. They managed to send Professor Liu away thoroughly exasperated. Before she left, Gabriella added ominously, your father is flying back tomorrow. As night fell, Elena's blood pressure finally dropped to 150. He was massaging her swollen calves when the door opened again. This time it was Clara, holding a bouquet of aggressively blue hydrangeas. I heard Miss Flores was in the hospital, she said, placing the flowers on the bedside table. The cloying scent of her perfume made him sneeze. I just had to come and see for myself. Elena's expression turned to ice. Your sources are impressive, Miss Vance. Oh, it's all over the industry, Clara said with a look of feigned concern. The rumor is that Flores Industries is about to change leadership. A pregnant woman isn't really cut out for corporate warfare, is she? Before he could say anything, Elena put a hand on his arm. Clara, do you know why the blue hydrangea symbolizes heartlessness? She stroked a petal gently. It's because its color depends on the soil's pH, blue and alkaline, pink and acidic. Just like some people who change their tune depending on who they're talking to. Clara's face fell. He had to suppress a laugh. Only Elena could insult someone using a chemistry lesson. After Clara left in a huff, Elena was seized by a violent coughing fit. He hit the call button, then saw to his horror a fleck of blood in the tissue she was holding. The alarms on the monitors blared, and a team of doctors and nurses rushed in. He was pushed out into the hallway, watching through the glass as they worked frantically. Elena's oxygen levels were dropping, her blood pressure was spiking again, and he heard someone shout to prep an operating room for a section. His legs felt like they were filled with lead, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Flores. Rooftop. Now. The wind on the roof was sharp enough to cut. Mr. Flores stood with his back to him, his silver hair like a cold fire in the moonlight. My daughter has always been stubborn, he said without turning. When she was 3, she had a high fever and refused to take her medicine. Ended up with pneumonia. He clenched his fists. She'll get through this, too. He turned, his eyes as sharp as ever. Do you know why I was against your marriage? It wasn't because you were poor. It was because you're too much like her mother. A romantic who mistook adventure for real life. He stared at him. It was the first time he'd ever heard anything about Elena's mother. Her mother was 7 months pregnant with her and insisted on going mountain climbing. She had a placental abruption. The old man's voice grew thick. Elena was delivered by emergency section. Her mother never made it off the operating table. The night suddenly felt impossibly cold. He finally understood the source of Elena's relentless drive. It was the tragic, lifelong defiance of a child who had never known her mother. I won't let her repeat that, he said. But I won't take away her right to be a mother either. Mr. Flores stared at him for a long, silent moment. Do you love her? He asked finally. The question hit him like a physical blow. Did he love her? From that first boozy kiss in the rain, to the tear he saw when they heard their baby's heartbeat, to the fierce way she defended him in her silk robe. His heart had known the answer for a long time. Yes, he said, like the mountains love the moon. He was silent for a moment, then pulled out his phone. Get the helicopter ready. I want the specialist team from the Mayo Clinic here now. At 3 in the morning, after the new team's consultation, a new plan was in place. Blood purification to reduce the inflammatory markers. As the dialysis machine roared to life, Elena's blood pressure finally began to stabilize. He sat by her bed, dabbing her chapped lips with a wet cotton swab. Her eyelashes fluttered in her sleep like the wings of a wounded butterfly. Outside, the morning star began to rise. His phone screen lit up, a message from the new energy team. Green Energy Tech has announced the suspension of their battery RD. Stock has plummeted 60%. He gently took Elena's hand. This was the hand that had signed billion-dollar contracts and left bloody bite marks on his shoulder. Now it lay quietly in his, warm and fragile. We won, Miss Flores, he whispered. You can rest now and just be a mom. On the monitor, the line tracing her vitals rose and fell in a steady, gentle rhythm, like the calm, quiet waves of a mountain lake. As the clock in the delivery room ticked over to midnight, Elena's nails carved 5 bloody grooves into the back of his hand. She was like a wounded panther, and in the final half hour, after her epidural wore off, she expanded her vocabulary of curses against him to include at least 6 new languages. When a baby's cry finally split the air, she collapsed onto the bed, drenched in sweat, and rasped, Alex, if you ever get me pregnant again. Never again, I promise, he said, kissing her damp forehead. Our little Nuria is perfect enough. A nurse placed the wrinkly, screaming infant on Elena's chest, and she immediately began to cry harder than the baby. The corporate shark who could eviscerate a rival in the boardroom was now fumbling to support the 7-pound body of their daughter, her fingers trembling like the bluebells outside his guest house. Through the glass, Mr. Flores was openly weeping. Gabriella, his wife, seized the opportunity to hand him a handkerchief. The hallway was overflowing with flower arrangements from the board of directors, the most ostentatious of which was a solid gold pendant from Director Garcia. Ever since their hostile takeover of Green Energy Tech, the man's sycophantic behavior had been enough to give him hives. Their suite at the Postpartum Recovery Center was more luxurious than the Flores estate. He was woken in the middle of the night by crying and found Elena standing by the floor-to-ceiling window holding the baby. Her silhouette looked as thin and fragile as a piece of paper. The specter of postpartum depression was hovering, though she would die before admitting it. Let me, he said, taking a wailing Nuria from her arms. Elena needs a rest. Elena shook her head stubbornly. Why won't she stop crying? Probably takes after her mother, born dramatic. He started humming an old Appalachian lullaby, holding the baby against his chest and swaying gently. The soothing techniques he perfected on stressed-out tourists at the guest house worked their magic, and Nuria's cries gradually subsided. Elena stared at them, her gaze as soft as moonlight on water. Where did you learn to do that? We had a volunteer at the guest house who was a baby nurse, he said, placing the sleeping infant back in her bassinet. She taught me to use the rhythm of your heartbeat to calm them down. It works on the same principle as de-escalating a guest who's angry about the Wi-Fi. Elena suddenly grabbed the hem of his shirt. The quarterly report is next week, and I have to be there, she said, biting her lip. But Nuria? He looked at the dark circles under her eyes and remembered the doctor's warning to rest for at least 6 weeks. This woman was more worried about missing a board meeting than about her own physical recovery. Elena, he said, cupping her face in his hands, do you know who the largest individual shareholder in Flores Industries is right now? Her eyes widened. After the takeover, 12 of the company's stock was legally in my name, all of which she had transferred to him during her pregnancy. I'll go to the meeting tomorrow, he said, rubbing her hollowed cheeks with his thumb. Your only job is to be a professional milk machine. She opened her mouth to argue, but he silenced her with a kiss. It was gentle and long, and he felt the tension slowly leave her body. While he pulled away, he tasted the salt of her tears. Alex, she whispered, her forehead pressed against his. Don't let them push you around. He grinned. The last person who tried to bully me is probably still picking gravel out of their teeth. The next morning, he walked into the boardroom wearing a custom suit Elena had ordered for him. The chattering room fell silent. Director Garcia's toupee looked like it was about to jump off his head in shock. "Good morning, everyone," he said, clicking open the presentation Elena had prepared. "My wife wanted me to let you all know that if anyone gives me a hard time today, she'll be personally canceling their year-end bonus." A collective gasp went through the room. It was a total bluff, of course, but the effect was spectacular. The 3-hour presentation went off without a hitch until the head of RD brought up the North American supply chain crisis. "Our Canadian supplier is demanding a 30% price hike, or they'll cut us off," the CFO said, looking grim. "Our profit margins on the new EVs are already razor thin. Find a new supplier," he said simply. The room buzzed with protests. Director Garcia smirked. "Young man, do you have any idea how long the vetting process for a new supplier takes?" He pulled up a map on the screen. "There's a rare earth mineral processing plant in western North Carolina. They shut down 3 years ago due to environmental concerns, but last month they passed their new ISO certification." It was a piece of information he'd picked up from a guest at the guest house. "So what?" The RD head scoffed. "The plant manager's daughter worked for me at the guest house for 3 years, he said with a smile. "Yesterday, he gave me a personal video tour of their production line. It's fully compliant, and their bid came in at 60% of what the Canadians are asking." The boardroom was dead silent. He was finally starting to understand what Elena meant by business instincts. It was just the art of reading people, magnified 100 times. After the meeting, Director Garcia intercepted him. "Mr. Mendoza, a personal request. My daughter is a huge admirer of your wife. She was wondering if she could get a photo with her." He clapped him on the shoulder. "Maybe after Miss Flores' maternity leave is over." The old fox changed his tune faster than the weather in the Sierra Morena Mountains. On the way back to the recovery center, he picked up a bouquet of bluebells. Elena was nursing Nuria, the afternoon light filtering through the curtains and bathing her in a soft glow, like a Renaissance painting. He put the flowers in a vase by the bed. She looked up. "Did it go well?" "Nailed down a new supplier," he said with a proud grin, "and put the fear of God into the board." She chuckled, her dimple making an appearance. Such a show-off. He leaned down and kissed the top of her head, inhaling the sweet, milky scent of new motherhood. In her arms, Nuria drank contentedly, her tiny fists clenching and unclenching as if conducting an orchestra. That night, he was woken by quiet sobs. Elena was curled up on the couch, clutching a piece of paper. He went over and saw it was her postpartum checkup report. The diagnosis was severe pelvic floor dysfunction, with a recommendation for surgical intervention. "It's okay," he said, kneeling and wiping her tears. "I know an old woman in the mountains who has an herbal steam treatment for this." "I'm getting the surgery," she cut him off. "Next week." He was stunned. "But what about Nuria?" "We'll switch to formula," she said, her voice shaking but resolute. "The company is going public in the second half of the year. I can't be leaking every time I sneeze." The moonlight illuminated her stubborn profile, and in that moment he saw the girl who had forcibly kissed him on a rainy rooftop. Time, like the tides, had pushed them from strangers to parents, but had never managed to erode the core of fierce pride within her. "Okay," he said, taking her hand. "But on one condition." She looked at him warily. "You have to let me sing you a lullaby every night," he said, squeezing her fingertips. "Just like I do for Nuria." Elena's eyes welled up with tears again. She threw herself into his arms, collapsing against him like a ship that had finally found its harbor. He held her, rocking her gently, and hummed a new, improvised tune. "The bluebells bloom and bloom for a girl who's tough as stone."